back to
A201.
A201. Bill told me to go fast.
Here it is, right here.
It's the north elevation, Bill.
Getting there.
There's a little teeny sketch up there in the sky.
Yep.
Transposing that. So soft in the corner, not a big architectural statement, but I think it kind of goes with the overall facade. And if you go to the east elevation, which is on sheet A202, I wanted to talk about some of the comments that were made about the facade of our apartments, which are beyond the our transplanted cottages. We've had some success, and Design Arc has, and I think Jeff Shelton has also had some success with the larger openings on our projects, especially when you're facing north and east to the mountains. So there are small units, and I think it'd be really nice to have, when you walk into the unit, to really be able to see the Riviera and the mountains. So we're going to kind of stick to our guns with our larger openings, but we did modulate the upper floor a bit, reacting to Bill Mahan's comments. So we kind of divided up into a triptych set of windows on the two facades, and the center facade still has a Moorish arch that extends down to a larger window. But it's not a steel window. I think we're going to break it up with wood mold sections, so it's not just a large window. It's not that large to begin with anyway. It's only about 7 feet wide, I think. So again, we're using this vernacular as a style to help separate our different types of architecture. Because it's a big project, we thought it would be important to kind of switch our styles as we move along through the project. We've kind of worked on lowering these gaps between the separate buildings. So these gaps are far back and lower, so that hopefully when we're done, they're more open. We'll have a project that doesn't look the same, when you're looking at it from, say, the parking lot of the police station, which is the west elevation, which is not as significant. But this is kind of what you see if you're in the back parking lot or looking at it from the DA building. Again, a simple facade on the western side. We do have an issue because the existing building is only about 15 feet, 18 feet away from our property line. So these units really could enjoy having bigger windows for more light. This also tends to shade our project from the western sun as it's setting. You can see here where we've worked on stepping down the facade and the structure to the courtyard as well.
Okay.
I need to look at
the drawings.
Yeah.
It's. I'd suggest we take about 5 minutes and just walk through the drawings on our own.
There's quite a bit of new perspectives in the back that kind of, I think, really help clarify the overall massing of the project. There's also a solar worksheet. Various times of year. But essentially, the courtyard units to the south of us are never shaded by our project, which was suggested, I think, by one of the residents there. It's just to the south of us, so no shade.
So when you want it turned? When you want the page turned?
You just look at it by our building, not shaded by us. have another illustration to pass around, which is actually a blown-up version of one of the ones that was kind of small on our presentation. You guys care to look at that too?
Okay. Let me know when you've had enough time. Is that chair available for public comment? Could you pull that one around?
So essentially, even though it's a long building, our goal is to divide it into 4 separate buildings visually. So there's the styles change and transform, I think, each building into a more interesting building so that it doesn't look like one long project. So we're looking at, kind of combining Mediterranean classic with a little bit of Irving Gill. I could go through and explain my philosophy on each building if you'd like, but it's truly our intention to break down the overall massing by using some of those architectural techniques.
Okay.
Anything to add, Melissa? Great.
Well, the courthouse used to be a big field.
What's that?
Big green field, yep. That's the DA building over there in the corner.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, all I wanted to add was that the perspectives is what I heard from the last meeting that they wanted to see. So those are provided for you. We didn't really spend much time besides this, downward-looking view. But I think it's important to look at the ones of the experience from the street to understand.
It's not just about the elevations.
I'm going to start public comment. We ready? Okay. Open public comment. I have a few speaker slips. If you could be brief, well, I'll begin by reading a letter from Patricia Chidlaw. You're here. You're not Patricia. Sorry. Never has been. Well, once I finish reading this, Steve Hagerman? Hogerman. You know these people here. If you'd come forward and then be ready to speak as soon as I finish reading the letter, followed by Patricia Chidlaw is not here, but so I'll read her letter. Okay. So if you'd come forward and I'll read her letter, followed by Theron Kontos. That name I can pronounce. Trisha Chidlaw, professional artist. She notes her house was in a recent Pearl Chase historical tour and soon to be featured in the Old House Journal. She's concerned about the congestion and cars in the neighborhood and notes she lives in an R4 neighborhood and she's concerned about the increased density brought on by the AUD program. And she's sad for her friends who live near this huge proposed project. Wish them the best and hope she won't have to fight the same battle here. Mr. Steve?
Oh, I'm over here.
Here, please, yeah.
I'm Steve Hogerman, Santa Barbara born and raised, and I own and restore 2 of the little cottages. I live in one and rent the other. I wish we could talk about this whole ill-advised AUD concept. I wish we could approve the 3-story building that this developer proposed some years ago, because we're not talking about some infill behind human-scale Garden Street, which for nearly a century has been lined with 1- and 2-story cottages, most of which will be demolished. We're talking 2 stories down, 4 stories up, a structure the scale of the Balboa building crammed into the middle of our block. But my highest personal concern is still our courtyard of 8 little cottages. When the developer bought the back 2 cottages, we thought he was investing in 2 cute old rental houses. But no, he wants to demolish them too. It reminds me of Los Angeles surreptitiously buying up the Owens Valley to steal its water. You can see on the plot plan that this square of real estate, the back portion of our courtyard, is apart from the rest of the project. Our courtyard is a unique, unified, mini neighborhood. This is not a voluntary lot merger. It's only voluntary to the developer who has millions of dollars to gain, not to the people who live here, and not to history. You can almost hear the 2 back cottages screaming, "No, don't tear us down." We can't have our courtyard amputated with looming buildings stair-stepping upwards into the sky like Jack's beanstalk 5 feet behind us. Would you want this massive project next to your homes? Help save our neighborhood, our courtyard, my home. Thank you.
Thank you. Theron, followed by Josephine DiLoretto.
I live in one of the units, too, Unit C, and I agree with everything Steve said. It's just the size and scope of this thing seems like gigantic, and I live there, so I know that I have to go, when I go grocery shopping, I drive, so I'm afraid of all the congestion there. That, I mean, you can walk to restaurants and stuff like that, but if you get things for necessity, you have to drive. So I know with all those units, it's just going to be a big, seems like a big mess, even though they do have parking. Parking is really hard to find there as it is as a resident there. And the other thing was I would like it if they could restore the 2 cottages in the courtyard and keep the courtyard cohesive and maintain the integrity of that little courtyard. And restore them like they're doing the ones on Garden Street. And then if they want to propose that big wall, they can put that in back of their 2 bungalows in the back. And I just think it just encroaches on the motor court. And yeah, that's about it. And I agree with everything Steve said about just keeping it quaint and a nice little place to live without huge, massive thing there with congestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Josephine, followed by Steve Harrell.
Speaking of the back guest cottages, or his cottages, that he wants to tear down, they are restorable and they will destroy the courtyard itself. And I do believe that the height and size of this building that he proposes is 4, as he said, 4 feet up, 4 stories high and 2 stories down. It's absolutely terrifying when you think about it in the building. And we can save the back cottages. He's let them deteriorate. And I see no reason why they should destroy those at all. But Santa Barbara has a unique, absolutely marvelous history of everything here. And now we're losing the history of the little uniqueness. I think I tried to think of everything to say and lost half of it. So let's try to save the charm and the integrity of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
My name's Steve Harrell. I'm the next door neighbor to this project, and I'm in support of the project. I particularly enjoy the sensitivity that's given to the walkways and the open space, and I think it's something that would improve this block immensely. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the public wishing to speak, I'll close public comment to the commission for questions. Who would like to start? Commissioner, did I hear?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Mahan?
No, did you,
Yeah, I did it.
you said Mr. Chair.
It's getting late. Adult beverages for all.
Yeah.
I guess the central question I have is, why does it pencil out in this project, and why must the central structure be so big? That's one question. And I wondered if, in your architectural magic, why these two cottages have to be destroyed. Why can't they be refurbished? That was a fairly recent idea. And if that's not possible, cannot the stepping back of those two, even though they're less looming than they were, they still really encroach upon the back of that motor court. And I wonder if that could be, I'm sure that it can be made less obtrusive. And the rest are comments. I'll save those.
Well, I'll address the first question, which
Okay.
is why it has to be big. And I'm glad you brought that up because it took. I think in the first presentation, Mark Kirkhart kind of led you through the evolution of the site plan and how the building would work with respect to one primary goal, which was to preserve those two Queen Anne buildings. So in those iterations, we found that the best way to treat those buildings, and Mark, as the architect, he can jump in and share as well, but the because those take up a lot of space, and we wanted to create space and open space on the ground floor between it and the building, that meant that the mass of the building had to be stacked up behind it, right? So you end up with a 4-story building because you're preserving these buildings. If you weren't preserving these buildings, obviously, we've got all that land to build on, we could do 2 stories, and we get the same number of units. So it was that process of balancing those two things. And yeah, okay, so we could build off the back of these, and do a piggyback, a camelback, or whatever. But that's not very elegant. This is elegant, and I think it works. I think when you look at it in perspective, especially from the person walking on Garden Street, it actually is so far back that it doesn't seem
Put it into the middle.
large to me. And then the other question, I think, was more of an architectural question. What was the second
Reducing the
question?
visual impact of those end
Yes.
structures against the motor court.
The thing about that, Michael, is that, again, we reduced the massing of that, stepped it down, I think, nicely towards the back of the motor court. So there is a...
I just want to reiterate that it came down almost 3 feet, and then
we
the
changed
roof
it.
line
Yeah.
also came down
Yeah.
further. So it went down pretty dramatically in the back.
And essentially, from the back of the motor court, you have our property line with a 5-foot privacy wall for our unit back there. And then it steps back about 5 feet, and then it goes up 2 stories. So essentially, from the end of the parking, that little driveway, if you're standing there, say, 20 feet away from it, you'll see a 6-foot wall, which is a privacy wall, landscaping, and the tile eave of a 2-story house. I mean, I think in elevation it doesn't do it justice, but it does step back quite significantly. Yeah.
Thank you.
So just so people
Thank you.
know. Yeah.
403
Commissioner,
Street
is
View.
that, do you have any other questions, Mr. Jory?
Don't.
Mr. Mahan, questions?
Well, yeah, I'm looking at sheet A101, and I'm also focusing on these units that are at the end of the motor court. And so this is a 2-story building, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have 4 units there.
That's right.
Correct.
And we take away 2 units from the motor court, and we take away 2 houses on Garden Street. So getting to this sound community planning thing again, it seems hard for me to take away from the motor court, which we think is very nice, and we really don't gain anything in terms of units. We take away 4 units in this project, and we build 4 units.
Well,
And if
there's
just
10
let me
units.
finish.
Okay.
Let me finish my question. So the question is, what's to be gained here in terms of units?
Well, on that lot, there's 4 on the ground floor, and then there's 4 above that, and then there's another 2.
No. I'm just these units here are the ones that destroy the last units right in the motor court.
Right. So there's a
So
trade-off of 2.
You've got 2 there and 2 up above.
Right, 4
You
for
take
2.
away 2 and you take away 2. That's 4 for 4. It seems like to me. I mean, that's a comment, but
Well, we add 52.
anyway, that's my question. It seems like it's 4 to 4.
Commissioner Rios, questions?
I'm just listening.
Commissioner Vania, questions?
No, I don't have any questions other than.
Commissioner Grumbine, questions?
Okay, so in looking at the aerial perspective,
Page.
Which page is that?
page 0.
0. This one.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Oh wait, it's probably repeated on here. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so looking at A402, the perspective northeast aerial. So the building that's across the street from your project on the right, far right here, that flat roof that you're showing, is that the plate or is that the? Oh, sure.
The villas,
Senior housing.
senior housing.
Yeah. So this, I'm just wondering, flat roof, is that the top of wall, or is that roof, or is that somewhere
There's a
between?
roof up there. I could bring in some photos. But
There's a roof.
There's a
There's
roof,
a roof
but
on
I'm
the
wondering
corner.
if
I have photos here. Yeah.
Retirement villa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see what it is. Anyway, keep
whether
talking.
whether it's the top of wall or whether it's the top of roof or some average in between, because you're showing it flat. So I'm just trying to figure out what. I think it has at least some slope
Does
to it.
have a little,
It might have a
edge
little
of tile,
Taco
you
Bell
know.
roof or something.
probably a mansard roof up there. Thinking about the overall depth of it, but
Okay.
it does have a tile roof. It's not flat.
Okay. And so on your model, or that, if we can go back to that, or you can even point it on that one.
Page 0.
Or that one.
Page 0.
Yeah. So on this, just compare. I'm just trying to visually compare heights and that. So this, would you say that that's like your edge of your tile, or that's
I
the
would
top of
say
the roof, or
so,
somewhere in
yeah.
between? Okay.
At some point, we had something that compared them pretty
We
well.
do have an elevation section, which is the east elevation, I believe, which grabs a little bit.
Yeah.
Of, there you go.
Because you got a little piece of it here.
A little bit of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a tallish building.
Yeah.
Across the street. Again, housing.
Okay. Yeah. And the church was my next question. So is there any?
It shows here in perspective.
Yeah. Shows there. Yeah. There in perspective.
It's a beautiful project with a tower, and it's pretty spectacular.
Okay.
Photos of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I know. I definitely know what it looks like. Okay. Great. That's.
Again, I want to reiterate, part of our overall planning was to, Annapurmu is more majestic street and less residential feeling than Garden. So we thought it was appropriate to move these 2 cottages to the Garden Street side. And if you ever spend a moment to walk down Garden Street and kind of imagine that setting, it's kind of nice, because really the east side of the street are all sort of smaller 1-story, some 2-story cottages as well.
Yeah.
So
No. I
I think
definitely know
that's
this.
complementary.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Other questions? Comments?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Drury?
I have one question, then comment. That's all right.
Yeah.
As the axis of the building, the north-south axis, I guess the south end is Figueroa, is that correct? So I know that Garden runs downhill all the way here. So the building gets bigger because it's 3 stories on the corner, am I correct? And then it becomes 4 stories as it goes south toward Figueroa. Okay, that was a question.
It comes,
Steps
it comes
down and
back,
becomes 4.
it steps down, almost 3 feet,
Right.
and then continues, but the ground falls away.
You can see it there pretty well.
So that leads to my first comment, and first comment is why cannot the central axis of the building is actually more telling in one of your simulations, because it's the profile against Garden Street, against the cottages, is in a gray. So it looks atmospheric, and it actually looks bigger, which is probably not to your advantage.
A202, I think you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. A202 would be it's the central buildings still look overwhelming to me, and I think that the step downs need to be more respectful to the existing motor court, and the Anapamu elevation is in better scale in relationship to the senior villa across the street and the Methodist church. But again, the core buildings loom over everything. I would encourage you to reduce the height. I would love it to be 3 stories instead of 4. And I think that the simplification of the west elevation, one facing the police station, should be echoed in the simplification of the east facade as well. It's very busy, and I think it lends, because of the verticality of the windows, I think it lends this monumental scale to it that really is out of place in the neighborhood. And I think, I know there's going to be a project there, but I would encourage and wish for I would like to see 3 stories maximum. And it's a wishful thought, but I would love the 2 cottages at the end of the motor court to be refurbished, be part of the project, but be refurbished as they should be, and keep the motor court intact. That's it.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Mr. Mahan.
Are you waiting?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was real thought trying to.
There was a moment there. I think
It's almost 7. So.
It's almost 7, and I'm getting buzzed for the dinner. I was supposed to show up at 6 o'clock.
I think the corner building at the Garden and Anapamu Street has improved. The corner has definitely improved from the last time, and I appreciate the openness in the middle of the block that you can see in this perspective here. I think that's going in the right direction. I believe that breaking these central buildings that are in the middle of the block, which I think last time you were here that was more like one continuous building, breaking those up into 3 buildings is certainly going in the right direction. We've looked at 2 other AUD projects where they use townhouses, and so there would be a 3-story, and then there'd be a townhouse with a 4-story, and then a 3-story, and then a townhouse with a 4-story, and we found that to be very successful. I know it cuts down on your volume, but it really works well, and you find it is a lot more compatible with these residential neighborhoods. And you might think about that. I feel that, let's see, where's the Anapamu Street elevation? So and I agree that with Commissioner
201?
Drury
201.
that as I said in my questioning, that taking out the 2 units in the motor court and 2 units off of Figueroa Street, off of Garden Street, and then building 4 units back doesn't really gain us too much. I know they'd be nicer units and bigger and all that kind of stuff, and nicer bathrooms and everything, but it's unit for unit. We're giving away 4, and we're getting 4, and there's a lot of feeling that the motor court should be protected. It's a little bit of past Santa Barbara, and we like that. The Anapamoo Street elevation, I think the left side of it is very good. It's got simplicity, and in my estimation, simplicity always makes things look smaller. Commissioner Drury and I were looking, we were over at the courthouse, and we were looking at the district attorney building, which is a big building. A lot of it's four-story and three-story, but it has a certain simplicity to it that gives it a lot of dignity, and it just seems really good. So I feel that as this building moves toward the center with these different kind of arches, a round arch and a Gothic arch, and it's too many different things going on, and it could be unified and be simplified. I think that I feel that the second building. Let's see if I can get to the east elevation here. Yeah. The second building on A205, the second building is, in my estimation, pretty successful. It's 4-story. It looks like it's only 3 stories. I don't know if it's 4 stories or 3 stories, but it's got a podium. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. This feels pretty successful. I think the symmetry of this is working against you. I think it makes it too formal, and it gets bigger. The symmetry makes it bigger in my mind, and I think if these, if this was a townhouse and this wasn't, and this maybe somehow it would mitigate the massiveness of that. And then when you get to here, I just don't feel like we should have that encroaching into the motor court, and we don't gain any units by doing that. But I do believe that you've made progress, and I certainly appreciate the presentation that you're giving us. It's a very, very good and very helpful. And I think that this is definitely going in a better direction than the last time we saw it, and I keep working.
Commissioner Rios?
I support protecting the motor court. I think that's part of historic Santa Barbara that should be maintained. The building that bothers me the most is the one in the center. I think it's too massive, and it looms over everything else, and it would be nice if it could be a 3-story structure and follow more into a simplistic architectural design. I like the fact that you set back from the corner, but again, simplicity is really one of the things that makes a huge building or a large building look smaller, and that's one of the things that I think needs to be worked very, very much on. But this one building right here, it just doesn't fit with the rest. And I think it should be looked at and studied very carefully. Your turn.
My turn. Well, I agree with what the other gentlemen have said, and far be it, I think that a lot of thought has been put into it, and I can appreciate that, but the mass, bulk, and scale of the whole thing, to me, is just overwhelming. I think it just loses the integrity of the city as far as that's concerned. Building from within and moves it both ways.
Speak up.
They went home. It was 7 o'clock.
Can you speak up?
Anyway, I just think the mass, bulk, and scale of the whole thing is just overwhelming for the neighborhood and all of the other things that are surrounding it. I know that you've tried to be sensitive, and you have, and the design is very meritorious, but in addition to that, I think you're having a little bit of everything once again, and we have too much going on, and it almost begins to look castle-like. And I think that if you could get it down to 3 stories, I'd be a lot more receptive to it. In addition to that, I think it would be much more respective of the neighborhood overall. And I still think you'd still be making a lot of money on it.
Commissioner Grumbine.
No comments. Just kidding.
That's a first.
I'll add my own comments.
Okay, let's adjourn the meeting and go.
Okay, so I would say.
What sheet are you looking
Sorry,
at?
we'll go to a sheet with a number.
Time's up.
So A402.
I got
So
it.
and maybe I'll just go over there because we have to point things in rather than grab. So I think that this corner is fantastic. I think you've really worked it out very well. I think that all the frontage on Anapamu, even though you go up to 4 stories here and you have it as for the resident lounge, and you give it as a semi-public space, and I think that's really very nice and very well done. And I think if there is a spot to go 4 stories, it's on this street and here. I really do. I really agree with the comment that the 4-story here, it's such a juxtaposition between the 1-story and the 4-story. It really is hard to take that here in this place. I think it's much more doable in the right place here as you've done it. And even though the moving of historic buildings is not a good thing in and of itself, I think you're doing the right thing in terms of getting onto Garden Street, and I do think that this has much more the 1-story, 1- and 2-story character that you're going with here. And then finally, I do think that it would be really great if you can somehow get it to work where you don't have the last bit of garden court, the last edge gone. If Alex Cole was here, one of the questions I was going to ask her was how, in the sense of that, how was that those findings made in terms of the end there, because it does seem that this would be still a core part of it, of the whole court layout, whether or not the buildings were dilapidated or not. So if there is some way of getting this to work with keeping those, I think that would be very supportive. And I think I don't know how I could support a 4-story back here. The larger thing here is more supportable. And I really like what you did with the Paseo here, getting to work through. I think it does create that opening, and it actually opens on the historic. It opens into the historic area or the historic structure that really does a great job with that. So there you go.
When I look at this project, this looks like it belongs in Santa Barbara. This looks like it belongs in Santa Barbara. And I know. I know. This does not. I don't know where that belongs, but it doesn't look like Santa Barbara. It looks like Los Angeles. When I look at the Anapamu elevation, it's sort of like, and Commissioner Mahan said, simplicity. You're trying too hard to disguise this huge building by cluttering it up with stuff. It just doesn't look like Santa Barbara. It looks like Mar-a-Lago.
We got really good chocolate cake.
They do. I hear. And again, this does not look like Santa Barbara. And granted, there, within our lifetime, there may be a huge building here of which we have no control. But it doesn't look like Santa Barbara. That doesn't look like Santa Barbara. So I think you've got the building on the corner is successful. The rest is not. And the four stories, I can't support the size, bulk, and scale of this project. I can't make neighborhood compatibility findings. I can't make compatibility findings with the architecture of Santa Barbara. Those are my personal comments. To summarize the comments from the rest of the commission, there is a strong desire to retain the two buildings, at least in their footprint and scale, at the end of the bungalow court. Motor court, I believe it's being called. That the fourth story remains problematic for most of the commissioners. That the open space in the middle and the relocation of the two bungalows still remains supported by the commission. That the architectural expression needs to be simplified. And as to the size, bulk, and scale, I'll take a straw vote. How many think that the size, bulk, and scale is acceptable? None. So the size, bulk, and scale needs to be reduced.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mahan.
Yeah, I mentioned the other two projects that we've looked at recently, the AUD projects that have the 3- and 4-story with the townhouse, the intermittent townhouse, the one on Delagara Street that we looked at 2 weeks ago, and the one on Chapala Street that we looked at maybe 6 weeks ago. And I think it would be important for the applicant to get with staff, maybe study those particular solutions, and we found in both cases, and especially the Delagara Street project, very acceptable, and that they need to look at that. And
there was the one where hazard cycle.
Yeah.
What's that? That's Correa Street.
That's Delagara Street.
That's Delagara? Okay.
Yeah, Delagara Street.
That was an exemplary project, and what they did was they just canted the buildings, and they made a real paseo out of the space. They did a great job in making that building look smaller in a meaningful way. Mr. Drury.
I just want to also, in my experience with Mr. Shields, who's been saddled with some of the landmark new projects, La Entrada, for instance, you have your chops. You know what to do. You really are good at this. So
Also did the DA with Brian.
Yeah. You've done a lot of exemplary
right?
projects. Yes, he did.
good. There we have it.
You've done a lot of exemplary projects. We know you can solve this problem. That's why we challenge you to solve this problem. The next time we see this, we will have an historic structures report. And when is that? That's due in 2 weeks?
You can ask for when you would like to return. If you would like it to be 2 weeks, or you know what? Actually, I apologize. The agenda for the next I think it's May 3rd is completely full, and probably for May 17th I can see if I can squeeze it on, but we're really booked out. Sorry, now that we could potentially get it on for the 17th though. Yeah.
We-
The 17th would be
May 7th. May 17th, yes.
Yeah, I'm on.
Exactly.
Or you could just tack it on May 3rd about 8 o'clock at night. Yeah.
Exactly.
We've done that.
We've done that.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion for a 4 weeks continuance for the applicant to revise the design pursuant to your comments, Mr. Chair.
Can I have a second?
Second,
Any
and
other
I would
comments?
like to request the staff to try and schedule this early in the day, in the afternoon, so we're not sitting here. Because we
At
need
the end
to
of the
look,
day,
and
exhausted.
switching pages and things like that are difficult,
thing
and
if
we
we
need to
can.
really look at this very carefully.
It's a serious development.
It's a serious project and one of the biggest we will have, and we need to have it done when we're fresh and can really give it what it's due, because we're all tired right now.
Yeah.
I keep seeing food in front of me.
Yeah. So I have a first and a second and a request for an earlier agenda item, please. And all those in favor?
Aye.
You're gonna do
Any
this?
opposed?
I think I will.
Motion carries. We are adjourned.